Hello, welcome to Center for Khmer Studies. Center for Khmer Studies is a center devoted to all aspects of Cambodian society and culture, both as a teaching institution and as a research institute. We're based primarily in Siem Reap, Cambodia, but we also have offices in Phnom Penh. As we go ahead. My name is John Marston. I'm a scholar in residence for 6 months at Center for Khmer Studies. I'm based at the Center for Asian African Studies at El Colegio de Mexico in Mexico City when I'm not here in Cambodia. It's my pleasure today to introduce a talk by Noemi Didu, who is one of our CKS dissertation fellows. She did her research in 2022. She's a PhD candidate in visual anthropology at University A Marseille in France. She'll be talking about her topic is about the Cambodian community in France. Her topic is called Building and Maintaining a Social Space in Exile, an example of a Cambodian community abroad. So welcome, Noemi.
Thank you, Professor John, for before we get started, can you see the slide?
Not yet. Noemi, can you reshare?
Okay. I share it again. Can you hear it now? Can you see it now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. So, good afternoon, everyone. Before we get started, I would like to thank the Center for Khmer Studies for organizing this webinar, and of course for providing funding for my dissertation research. I would like to thank especially Sandy Swong for her help during my stay in Cambodia. And I would like to thank Professor John Marston for moderating this webinar today and for taking this time for it. I'm very happy. And of course, thank you everyone for joining us today. As Professor John said, my presentation is entitled Building and Maintaining a Social Space in Exile, an example of a Cambodian community abroad. And this is based on my PhD research. The research is ongoing. So this presentation is a preliminary look at the ethnographic research I conducted in France between 2021 and 2022, and in Cambodia between November 22 and February 23. Before we get started, I'd like to give you a quick overview of my presentation just to give you an idea, a roadmap of my presentation. I start with a presentation of the main topics of my research, and I will share with you some of my key research questions. The first part of the presentation of my talk will be a general presentation of my research, as I told you, based on an ethnographic fieldwork. But first, I will give you some historical landmarks about Cambodian migration, and I will discuss some concept I use in my dissertation, the concept of social spirit. The second part will focus on methodology and ethnographic field. And the third one, in the third one, I will present my data and some analysis. Of course, as I said, the research is still ongoing, so these are preliminary research findings, and I will be glad to discuss with you about this data. I'll conclude with some perspective for my next ethnographic fieldwork in Cambodia. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session, and I look forward to hearing your comments at the time. So let's get started. So I'm doing a PhD in a visual anthropology at the University of Aix-Marseille in France. And my PhD research is the crossroad of several fields. First, visual anthropology. The title of my dissertation for the moment is Continuities and Discontinuity in the Transmission of Memory in a Situation of Exile. The case of the Khmer Rouge period in the Cambodian social space. I prefer not to tell the name of the city in which I'm doing my fieldwork for some reason of anonymity. My supervisor are Lauren Van Lanker, who is a visual anthropologist from Belgium, and Anne-Yvonne Guillou. She's an anthropologist from Nanterre University in Paris. I will present you some of my dissertation topics today.
Can you put your slide in full screen?
Yes. Okay. Okay, so I will share with you now some of my dissertation topics. The first one is the transmission of knowledge, know-how, and memory as knowledge in the broadest sense. Social anchorage, transformation, or perpetuation among a Cambodian community in France. And the second will be the relationship to space, and I mean for space in the social space of exile, but also the space of an eventual return to the homeland, the physical space of the temple, the neighborhood, the city, the symbolic space of relationship with the dead and non-human beings, and the relationship to history and individual memory and time. And the third one will be the intergenerational solidarity based on relation between the living and the dead, the ritual structuring, transformation, and the transformation of ritual practices in exile. So now, let's have a look at the key research questions. There are different questions I'm asking in this research. What role does memory of the Khmer Rouge period and exile play in intergenerational transmission within the community I'm researching? What impact have the generation who lived through the Khmer Rouge regime and experienced exile had on the reconfiguration of Cambodian social space abroad? How memory is transmitted or attenuated? Is memory a determining factor in the action of Cambodian social space in France? In the absence of transmission from parents or grandparents, what tools and social frameworks do people call on when they want to reconstruct a family memory? As I'm working mostly on visual anthropology, I'm asking questions about filmmaking, and film-based ethnography. My approach is based on sensory ethnography. How can we use our sense to access the nonverbal, embodied, and ritual dimensions of memory? How can film evoke the traces inscribed in bodies, gestures, silences, and landscapes? Capture the invisible, materialize the unspeakable, and all that eludes both verbalization and ethnographic description. Can memory be represented? How can we tell a story of which there is no visible trace? How can film provide access to the sensitive sensory dimensions of relationship between people and between humans and non-humans? It is possible to represent individual and social memory in any other way than through images and sound that directly evoke it. I will share with you now just a quick overview on the state of the art about my topic. As I'm researching in France, I'm talking about the state of the art in France. So we can say that little recent social science research in France is focused on Southeast Asian diasporas and the Cambodian diaspora after the research carried out in the 80s and 90s. Apart from research in health anthropology, ethnopsychiatry, and anthropology of migration, it has to be said that in France, apart from social psychology, very few recent works in anthropology and sociology have taken interest in Cambodian communities, despite their large numbers in France. The loss integration and in the complex issues of identity, memory, transmission, and reconfiguration of social and intergenerational ties. More recently, there has been a series of research of a different kind. Writers and filmmakers are using artistic creation as a means of questioning identity, reconstructing memory. I put a slide with some history of the number of Cambodian refugees coming to moving abroad between 75 and 81,060,000. And I also, just to give you an idea, I wanted to share with you this graph to show you that the United States, of course, are the country who hosted most of the Cambodian refugees, and France is the second one. Before I start my first part, I wanted to share this. Sorry, I want to an excerpt from a book by Kataria called "From the Land of Shadows: War, Revolution, and the Making of the Cambodian Diaspora." This book was published when I started my PhD. And reading it today, these words resonate strongly with my research. So you can read it on this screen, but I read as well. In the diaspora, this historical trauma, which registers it's present in the refugee body, the fractured families, and the destabilized institution, is made even more acute by what is for most not only a forced severance from their homeland, but also a permanent exile. As the body moves, where does memory live? If memory is specially constituted, as Albax and Nora have argued, then the diaspora is one site where individual and collective memory is incubated, enhanced, edited, and transmitted. In its travel across space and time, memory takes on different forms, manifesting traces of transgenerational hunting in the silence that continues to envelop the Cambodian family. Silent site for culture and theorizing about recipes and interstices that survivors' resilience and agency reveal themselves, not in loud registers, but in the daily acts of living and repair. For many in the diaspora, rebuilding lives and community means waiving meaning and continuity from fragment and disorder, and transnational relational fabrics that have been fed by time, distance, and politics. So now we can start with the first part of my presentation. In that part, I will talk about my ethnographic fieldwork. It's a multi-sided ethnography. The first site is in French. I'm doing founded in 80s by Cambodian refugees. And in Cambodia, I'm doing an ethnographic film with a fieldwork, with families and monks moving between France, Cambodia, and the United States. I decided to conduct my fieldwork in a pagoda.
Sorry, Noemi, for interrupting again. I think your internet is not really strong. Can you turn off your
which is a place
video?
where memories and are passed down, and the living and the dead meet symbolically. I'm sorry. It's okay now? Can you hear me?
Yes, but like earlier, it's still quite interrupting with the internet signal. So maybe just turn off the video right for you.
I'm sorry. I'm
Oh, no worry.
yes, I start video because I'm having troubles with internet as well today. Okay. So,
Okay. Yeah, let's try without your camera.
yeah, maybe. Okay.
And please put your full screen. Thank you.
As I was saying, I'm doing an ethnographic fieldwork in in France. What is for me, it's a place where memories and knowledge are passed on, and where the living and the dead meet symbolically and ritually. Several generations come together for annual festivities. And this place is a space under constant construction and transformation, and the place for reconstruction and care for the elders. Some 30 family members manage the pagoda, and several thousand of people come together to attend the annual ceremonies of Chumben and Katen. Most of the people come from the provinces of Battambang or Darmentei, and there are three typology of people with different social backgrounds and migration paths. People who arrived before 75, mostly former non army soldiers, senior civil servants, and people living in the Northwest provinces. Then there are people who arrived after 79, so after the Vietnamese invasion. And there are also youngest people from a more recent migration who came in 2000 and 2000, between 2000 and 2010. The fieldwork I conducting in Cambodia is very recent, because I started it in November 2022, and I stayed 3 months in Cambodia. And I'll talk about this fieldwork later. This fieldwork was within families in their provinces, Ordarmente and Battambang, and with monks moving between France, Cambodia, and the United States. I also met some memory entrepreneurs and former Khmer Rouge soldiers. I do a lot of archive research, and I stayed there to improve my skills in Khmer. So let's have a look about my methodology. So as I'm an anthropologist, my research is a qualitative research based on participant observation. I use unstructured and semi-structured interviews, and also film. I use film in the fieldwork, and I also do digital ethnography on social media. I wanted to tell more about the film because I started filmmaking before my PhD. Actually, I started during my master's. I did a master's in anthropology with a major in visual anthropologist, and I made the first ethnographic fieldwork and do 2 short ethnographic films, but I can't share there because we have no time, and as the webinar is recorded, I can share there, but if someone is interested, you can ask me and I can share with you. So my first short film was a portrait of a Cambodian woman exiled in France. The soundtrack was an interview I made with her. I worked with her family photographic archives, and also with historical footage and film interviews I had shot myself. I wanted to establish a link between the past and the present, and to materialize history and its articulation with individual memory. This was my starting point, my first encounter, both with the fieldwork and with the camera. I was just starting out, groping around for a filmic device. I wanted to use archive images and family photos. But I felt like I ended up doing some illustration, and I wasn't satisfied with the result of this first film. And what's more, film interviews didn't strike me as an appropriate way of giving people a voice. This methodology, and especially a structured film interview, turns out not to be very heuristic. By imposing a temporal framework, the time of the interview, but also the segment of biography taken into consideration, narrative is freeze. I felt I accessed to pure information. I wanted to focus more on modes of enunciation and underlying logics of sharing or not sharing a story, a memory. I wanted to find other ways of bringing out a narrative and other ways of telling a story through gestures and space. But I was asking myself how to work on this presence absence, how to materialize the story in the present time. How can we articulate spatial and temporal distances and introduce a diachronic dimension in a film without making an history documentary when we work on several fields in a single film? These are questions I'm sharing with you now, this question, because these questions are still open for me. Because after this first film, I began a second project that I'm currently pursuing as part of my PhD. I started making a film-based ethnography and an observational film. I did an observational film in the VAT. And the approach that I developed in this film was different from the first one. Because it's based on the choice of filming the ordinary moments, of not filming interviews, of leaving room for silence, of being more interested in practices than speeches, of observing bodies in space, the management of space and its boundaries. And then, as I tell you, I'm pursuing this project in my PhD, but when I came back to the fieldwork, I came without camera, and I mostly did participant observation, unstructured interviews, and I participated in different activities of the community. And I think that for me, it's very important to talk about the film, because for me, it's a very important tool. First, and now I'm asking myself, I'm considering other ways of showing the film, because the feedback with people is very important, as Jean-Rouge said so many times. And so I'm trying to find a form for this film, and I'm trying to take EMIC audiovisual production into account and consider to making shorter formats that are easier to share with people and on social networks. And the film, of course, is a useful support for reflection, because filming on the fieldwork is not something that can be taken for granted. It forces us to question not only the way we look at things, but also the nature of the relationships we have with people and the degree of intimacy we feel with them. Asking the question of how to film leads us to question our place in the fieldwork, since film is in a way the objectification of the researcher's gaze, the materialization of his point of view. As the researcher, French anthropologist Baptiste Bueb said in one of his papers in 2016, they made the images reveal at an indexical level the researcher's position in the fieldwork. Where do we place the camera? At what distance from the subject? And we can see ethnographic film as a form of co-construction of knowledge with the people in the fieldwork. It's a research in progress involving people and taking EMIC audiovisual production into account. So now I put a slide with some of the concepts I'm using in my dissertation, because as I said, my PhD is if I will write a dissertation and I will do a film. And so I wanted to share some of the concepts I use in, first of all, the concept of social space. I'm taking this concept from Georges Condominas, who defines social space as a space determined by the set of relationship systems characteristics of the group under consideration. And it's an heuristic concept because it means the inseparability of space and time, and it allows us to take into account the diachronic and synchronic perspective at the same time. I'm also using the concept of memory, which is very, very common today, and I wanted to look more deeply at this concept. Memory as a social process, and the social condition under memories and counter memories are produced. And of course, it's a concept to be deconstructed because there is an imbrication of various levels and issues, private, public, and there is a compenetration of individual and collective memory. And also, can memory really be transmitted in a way? Yes, because I think what is important with memory is something that is really political. Memory is kind of an arena with political identity and economic issues. And I wanted to focus on private memory, family memories, and public memories. That's why I wanted to do some interviews with entrepreneurs of memory. Yeah, we can say that memory is a polysemic concept with different definition and use possible, depending on the discipline, on the actor who speaks, politicians, activists, victims, and the issue, political, economic. In all these levels, there is an imbrication of all these levels, as I told later. And so we can say that I'm basing my reflection of, first of all, on Maurice Holbach's, who was a precursor of memory studies with his work Les cadres sociaux de la mémoire in 1925 and La mémoire collective in 1950, and also La topographie légendaire des évangiles en Terre Sainte, about memory and space, which is very interesting for my topic. So we can say that individual memories are always produced in a given social situation through interaction, and memory cannot develop outside the social context. So collective memory, yes, we have to take into account the social condition that exists for the evocation and formulation of memory and processes. So now, as time is running, let's have a look at my data. Okay. So as I told you, my main fieldwork, ethnographic fieldwork, is in France. I started in September 21. I did at first 9 months and then 2 months between September, October 22, and I'm still doing some fieldwork now. And it is difficult for me to quantify the exact amount of time spent in the fieldwork because I live in the same city of the Watt, so I go back and forth in this place. We can see that it's also not only a multi-sided fieldwork, but also a multi-temporal fieldwork in a way. So as I told you, I do a lot of participant observation. I used to participate in ceremonies and other daily activities like cooking. I used to give French lessons for monks, do some housekeeping, I use my fieldwork notes for my dissertation and my reflections. I also just do some unstructured and semi-structured interviews with elders, community members, so first generation, with younger people, 1.8 and second generation, and also with youngest people for more recent migration. And the interviews are in French, and sometimes they in my in Cambodia, I started a fieldwork in November 22, and I did 3 months of fieldwork thanks to CKS. I did biographical interviews with monks moving between France and Cambodia, and participant observation of some of their activities in Cambodia, ceremony and caritative activities in Phnom Penh, Odarmente, and Battambang provinces. I also stay with families in Battambang provinces, taking part in various ceremonies and daily activities. And I did some semi-structured interviews with former Khmer soldiers and memory entrepreneurs. The third field work is the social media. I do digital ethnography, and I work on archives in order to collect emic footage, photos, and video on social media, and also work on archives, the archives of the VAT, the family photos, the memoir, and also in Cambodia, I spent a lot of time at Bopana Center searching for archives. And I also take into account the post-memorial productions, film, artworks, podcasts, autobiography of survivors, and matter literary productions circulating within the families. And part of my research findings, as I told you, is a qualitative research based on inductive method. So the multi-sided ethnography emerged from the fieldwork, and it was during the fieldwork that I felt that I had to go to Cambodia with the families to take into account the circulations of monks, of people between homeland and friends. So yes, so social space and circulation is very important in this fieldwork. We can say that there is a transnational social space, and I'm trying to identify the circuits of monks, of lay people, of non-human beings, of images. And we can say that those circulation are perpetuating this the social space in exile. Also, I have to consider that the fieldwork has expanded borders. There is kind of imaginary geography. There is, of course, the diaspora in French, the fractured families between French, Cambodian, and US, people from Kampuchea, Krom, and all of these are constituting a space, a transnational space, where information and through social medias, monks and lay people, goods and capital, and circulating. It is also a social space fragmented in exile. There is a breakdown, a recomposition of social categories and classes, different social statuses here and there. And also the importance of circulation and of moving back and forth between Cambodia and France is because migrants inhabit several spaces. There are multiple types of belongings, the society of origin of society, and this imaginary community is shaped by social media and circulation. So you can say that we pass from a double absence of the sociology of migration of Sayad to the double presence as the sociology of transnational migration I've started to research from the 90s. We can say that exile for this community, for the community I'm researching, is kind of Exile is a kind of rite of passage with a liminal space without the refugees camps. We give access to a new status, the status of political refugee. I'm taking into account the physical space of the vat, which is the center of the community's social life in this community, especially I'm researching. And this place give to people a visual continuity with the homeland. There is a plasticity of the space, various adaptation over time. It is really kind of new territory being imagined by people there. There is creation rather than transposition of rituals between there and here. A house is transformed into viara. There are architectural negotiation. There is a new temple still under construction. And I'm taking into account the evolution and transformation of this place through archive images. And also it is interesting to take into account the relationships between this space and the neighborhood, which is, I mean, the Wat is on the outskirts of a large city, and nothing can distinguish this from the neighboring buildings around. And this is a common feature for the Cambodian temples in France, with a few exceptions, as the Chilean and Calabas is written about this. So yeah, I'm taking into account the increase in violence outside and how people manage this violence in this area, and also the presence of human entities protecting the place. The intergenerational transmission is not linear. Dancing and music continue to be practiced by the elders, while language curses have been gradually abandoned. While the second intergeneration only visit the Wat occasionally and have little or no common of mind, the traditions and knowledge are perpetuated by the younger members of a more recent migration, and by the monks who travel between France and Cambodia. And yes, I have to explain this, that there are very few monks with permanent visas in France. Most of them only stay for 3 months. They don't speak French and have difficulty communicating with younger people. According to one of the monks interviewed, this is not the case in the US, where resident, but I don't know because I haven't been there, but he told me that resident monks are more numerous, they speak English and they have higher education, so they can take on an educational role with younger people. And according to these monks, language courses and temporary ordination of young people are more frequent in US, but in France this is quite rare. And older people and monks travel more regularly, helping to build pagodas in their homely villages and provinces and organizing local festivals. None of the people I met during the ethnographic field returned permanently to Cambodia. There are some tourists of origins for the youngest, and the first trip with its unitary value is sometimes the only one for the youngest. And 1.8 generation, I can say that 1.8 generation people I interviewed have traveled more compared to second and third, and sometimes some people have never been to Cambodia. And the memory, the transmission is not, as I said, it depends on families and is not linear. And sometimes young people try to reconstruct the memory with fragments of speech that they heard at home, such as the name of the refugee camps mentioned by parents. They recall their visit of S21. If all these fragments are interwoven in the discourse. Some tell me that they learn more Retipan or other films, and they try to reconstruct something, but they don't have all the elements to do that. So it's interesting to see how they try using different sources for doing that. Going back to the what, we can say that there is a people are acting on the past with the sending and non-sending in terms of national solidarity, taking care of the dead during specific rituals and through food offerings and paying tribute to parents. There are some ritual adaptation, but I'm not a specialist of Buddhism, but I saw that some cremation, some people written names of family members and burning them during Chumben, for example. Most of the elders organize multi-sided ceremonies for the dead. One ceremony in France and one ceremony in their village of origin, and they broadcast them via Facebook. There are also some acting on the present through political activism and taking care of the Wat and fundraising for constructing a new temple. And yes, I'm asking what social categories and structure persist today in this community, the organization with the community around the Wat, the ritual calendar, despite adaptation, the shifting of major ceremonies to weekends, marriage, the economic karma, and intergenerational solidarity. So it's actually, the research is still ongoing because I'm still on the fieldwork, and I plan the new fieldwork in Cambodia from January for 3 months. So in conclusion, just wanted to share with you some perspective. I'm thinking about using other interviewing tools like photo voice, elicitation interviews, and group interviews with people of different generation in the same space. I want to do more ethnographic fieldwork in the private sphere at home, first place of transmission. And I would like to do more activities with youngest generation. So I'm moving to Cambodia in a week for 3 months again. And I would like to do more film-based ethnography, maybe to use the footage I will make in Cambodia. I will use it when I'm back in France to discuss with people. Yeah, I want to use footage as a tool as well for sharing, for interviewing people. And of course, I'm asking myself a lot of questions of ethical and methodological questions. As the topic is quite sensitive because we are talking about traumatic memory. How can I access the effect of this memory without resorting to psychology, because I'm not a psychologist? And how can we ask questions, and how to interpret traces and nonverbal silent memories? So these are a lot of questions that are still open. And I will be glad to share with you, to discuss with you about this. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm here for your questions.
Okay, I hope we can turn the video on again. And
I'm trying.
yes, and I hope that this is all going to work, given our technical difficulties. But well, I don't. So what happens in that, now we ask you to write questions in the Q&A, and sometimes it takes a while for people to write the question, but start writing your questions. In the meantime, I'll ask a question or two. And first of all, thank you very much. I personally, having coming from the United States, I do find the whole issue of the diaspora is really interesting, and it adds a dimension to studying within the country itself. And again, I would emphasize that this is really important. And in the world we live in, this sort of global world, this transnational world, that we really can't ignore the fact that people are crossing borders. And so my first, I'll ask two questions, which to me are related. And well, I think you talk about this already, but it's maybe you can go in more detail. Of course, when we're talking about a community in France, the diaspora community, that they are, they're not just Cambodians. They're in some ways, they're a community apart. Their community has a different relationship to the majority population than if they were in Cambodia. And when we talk about the memory of traumatic experience, and I think we're thinking mostly about the Khmer Rouge period, but that's something we can continue to talk about. To what extent is traumatic memory just about the Khmer Rouge period, or is it about other things? So I know among my friends, we've had discussion that sometimes it actually seems like Cambodians who stayed in Cambodia have less problem of traumatic memory than people in the diaspora community, as though they're maybe. And do you find this? Do you think this is possible? And how does being in a diaspora community, in a minority community, how is the experience, the memory of trauma different? And so I'd like to ask that. I'd also like to ask about your use of the word exile. I personally, in my experience with Cambodians in the United States, I think we wouldn't normally use the word exile. And so why use the word exile? Do you think the Cambodians in France who you are dealing with, do they use the word exile, and would that have implications for them?
Thank you for this question, Professor Jan. Yeah. For your first question, as I told before, I only did 3 months of fieldwork in Cambodia, so I can just share my feeling about that, about how people cope in Cambodia. But I only stayed 3 months, so I don't know. But I feel that in diaspora, people as they move from their homeland, and memory is freezed in a way. They moved, so they stay of their life with these thoughts about the exile, about the war, and they talk a lot about that. We find in the community, and I have the feeling that maybe I'm wrong, I don't know, but in Cambodia, as society move on and people move on together, they have to move on, to develop, to build up the country. Memory is not that important issue. And maybe in diaspora, there is kind of fascination of Cambodians with memory. And we talk a lot about traumatic memory, about Cambodian genocide, more in the diaspora than maybe in Cambodia. So this, in the fieldwork to answer this question. And for the second question about exile, I use permanent situation, right? When I talk to people, they say that they are refugees, political refugees, and that they don't want to go back. Yes, of course, they want to go back sometimes to visit relatives, but they don't want to go back permanently for different reasons. For the elders, sometimes people tell me that was about health system in France is better, and if they go back to Cambodia, they will die or something like that. And also, some share me their deception when they see everything is changed. They can recognize this. I one a few told me sometimes I have questions more to understand what I don't know if when you talk with people in US they have the same experience or not, but yes, the experience is not always positive, of course, depending of people. I don't know if I have answered your question.
So they use the word refugee, not exactly exile. Well, a related question perhaps is, well, you're interested in the memory of traumatic memory. And again, this seems to make reference to the Pol Pot period more than anything else. So then maybe you have other things in mind. But when you talk about the new generation who didn't live through that, and so is it really that important to them? Should it really be that important to them to even think about the decade period? And this also relates to my question, to what extent, refugees are refugees, but, well, some of them who are coming now are just immigrants. And so, is it really so important for the younger generation to keep thinking about the Pol Pot period?
I think that for the youngest people who came from a more recent migration, I'm thinking about people born in Cambodia that they moved in France between, I don't know, 2000 and 2000. This, I think, is not an issue at all. But this is an issue for the French of Cambodian origins who are born in France. They try to understand what happened to their parents because they read about Khmer Rouge, they see movies, so they want to know what happened to their parents. But this is not an issue for the youngest people who come from Cambodia. I can't hear you, sorry.
No, I muted myself. Well, I'm particularly interested in the Buddhist communities because that's what I've done my research on. And I'm a little, it was the situation you described of the monks only coming for 3 months surprised me. And I think there are there are at least some senior monks at major temples who are permanent residents in France, but I can't speak to that. And so could you, elaborate more on this situation of the monks? And are some of them who come for 3 months, are they coming from the United States instead of from Cambodia? And what kind of activities do they have during these 2 months? And how does that relate to the whole organization and structure of the temple communities?
Yes, there are of course some senior monks in France in the most mostly in Paris, in some pagodas in Paris, but there are very few. There are not a lot, and what people feel to me, it's very hard to have a visa. So the monks are invited, families invite the monks from Cambodia. They know from Facebook, or they know them because they are from the same province, from the same village. So they invite them, and they come for 3 months. And during the 3 months, they move from one vat to another. They arrive in Paris, then they move to another city, and they stay, and they are invited for private ceremonies at people houses. Some monks are invited every year. Some of them would like to stay, but they can't. So they have to move back, and then they come again. For example, just to give you an idea, like I have the last 2 years, I met the same monks, about 3 or 4 monks that came every year or twice a year, and they just stayed 3 months. And now the pagoda, used to have a permanent monk, but he quit. And now they have a new one with resident. I don't know exactly. I think he comes from a pagoda in the suburbs of Paris, and now he is staying in that pagoda with two other youngest monks.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I hope that you'll write about this, or I do want to know more about it. Actually, there's and I'm embarrassed I can't remember her name. There's a Cambodian American anthropologist who did her field research at Cambodian temple in Italy, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes, and she's now a professor at California State Long Beach, and she did her research during the pandemic. I think it was a little bit difficult, but when I read her thesis, I was thinking, well, there can't be that many Cambodians in Italy, and
I don't know that.
there must be more written about this in but I hope, if I'm wrong, I hope you're going to be right about it. So I see there's and what we prefer is that people write in the question Q&A, but here's someone that's just from Facebook. It's from Diamond Sararit. Thank you so much for your presentation. I wonder if you can know some challenges that you encounter in the research. Is there any, don't address that question?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think that I can reply saying that when we do ethnographic fieldwork, we are always surprised, because we are working. Our research is based on inductive method, So when we arrive in the fieldwork, yes, of course, we have questions, we have ideas, but we don't know exactly what we're gonna find in the fieldwork. So of course, for example, when I started my research, I didn't take into consideration monks. I didn't know nothing about monks, about Buddhism. Of course, I was doing fieldwork in a temple, but my focus was not on monks. And I found that monks traveled a lot, and I found that they have a very important role in transmission and perpetuating the links between the diaspora and the homeland. And that's why I decided to follow the monks. So I don't know if I replied to your questions, but yeah, I didn't expect to work with monks, for example, at all.
Okay, thank you. And so another question. Well, again, you sort of this is something you've addressed, but just briefly. And when I was listening, because you do visual anthropology, and I was thinking that how, well, actually, even in my own research, sometimes I find myself, it's not just your filmmaking, but on social media, there's lots of Cambodians making videos themselves, especially when it comes to Buddhist ceremonies, family celebrations, and things like that. And so, well, you did mention that this is part of your research, but could you discuss how much, as a visual anthropologist, is that important? How important is that to your work?
Yeah, thank you for this question. Yeah, so first, there are a lot of images in the fieldwork, and when I started talking about my methodology, I started talking about two projects I made, two ethnographic films, and I ended up telling that when I came filming, I came back without camera, and the moment when I came back without camera, I started to be in the images of people. I was filmed. I was in the process. I was in the process of sharing these videos. I have a lot of fun stories about that, but it's not important. But I started to taking this into account. How can I use? What can I film? Because people are filming every time. So I have to film something different. Of course, I have to use the images. It's very important for me to construct a film with people. And I'm thinking to do short movies, actually. I didn't mention this before, because at the beginning I wanted to do a documentary, but now I'm really thinking about making short movies, using emic footage, archive images, and images I shoot myself, just to cross the gazes about situations. So yeah, I think it's very important to take it into account, the fact that people are filming all the time, and not only filming, they are sharing, they are performing. Even monks, I'm using a lot the videos of the monks.
That's true. I'm here in Cambodia. It's not really my field of research, but I went to a funeral in one of my field research, and this is how things have changed since I started doing this. And I'm a little nervous about taking photographs, and then I do post them on Facebook, but the villagers themselves are posting. They repost my photos, and they have their own photos. And even one of the monks who was participating the monk himself was posting pictures and videos. And so it's a different
Yeah.
world. It's a
Monks are
different
always,
world.
yeah. Monks are
Yeah.
always posting and sharing. Now there is
Yes,
one of the monks, of the resident monks, is very passionate about films. So he has his
Yeah.
own camera, he has a drone. So I think
Yes.
I want to make a movie with him, with like a co-director. I'm shy to ask this, but I think he can do it.
Well, just a couple more questions. Well, you use that phrase, entrepreneurs of memory. I guess I don't totally understand what you mean by that. Could you give some examples of entrepreneurs of memory?
Yeah, I use this because I use this entrepreneur de mémoire en français, enfin in French. I was thinking about the sites of memory, for example, Tulslang, for example, the Anlong Peace Center, all the sites of memory. And so I was thinking about people who work with memory in memory space.
Okay. And in France, who would they be in France, among the community in France then?
No, when I talked about entrepreneur de mémoire, it was during the fieldwork in Cambodia.
Okay.
In France, I only met one person because they made a memorial in Paris, in a square in Paris, a few years ago. I just met one of the person of the committee who fight to have the memorial. But there is not preference.
Okay. Well, a last question. I'm not by training, I'm not a Marxist, and although living in Mexico, I'm more aware of Marxism than I once was. And so part of things when I hear, this whole perspective of emphasizing memory, for example, that it sort of, to me, it seems like a departure from previous ways of looking things, which might have emphasized things like social class. And if you were going to add sort of a social economic perspective in defining the diaspora, the Cambodian diaspora community in France, could you do that?
Yes. Yes, of course. It's important to take into account the social economic background of people. That's why when I talk about the categories of people in the fieldwork, I said that they have different social economic background. I don't know if this was the question.
Yes. Well, but can you make any generalizations about the socioeconomic background of the Cambodian community that you're working with in France?
I think that I can't. I can say there are a lot of communities in France. So it's difficult to say. It's difficult to have a only point of view about this situation. But what is true is that there is a fracture and a recomposition of social classes in diaspora, because there are people coming, for example, who came before 75. They are sometimes relative of the royal family, or general in the army. There are people who are peasants, or and all those people come together, and there is a lot of struggles between people. Some can say, "Oh, have you heard how he talks? He used this word. Oh, he's a peasant. Oh, she's." People talk a lot about their social background. I mean, in my fieldwork, but I don't know it's in Paris or in Toulouse or in Lyon is the same. I have no idea. I wanted to actually to do a tournée of the pagoda, but it's too long to do it. But I would like to go to see others, others communities.
But does this figure in the social construction of memory? Does this? Yes. Okay.
Of course, because they don't have, of course, the same memory. Have the same story to tell. That's why this is I didn't plan to do that, but I did some interviews with former Khmer Rouge soldiers because I wanted to hear their stories as well. People from a peasant background, mostly women. I wanted to talk with women, and it was very interesting for me.
Okay, well, we covered a lot of territory. I think if it's okay with everybody, we'll call it a day. And so thank you very, very much. And thanks. I hope there are no more questions that I'm missing, right? And thanks to everyone who participated as the audience. And we look forward to Noemi's future work that's going to come out of this. So thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you very much, Professor Marston, and thank you very much to CKS, to Sandy Song, and to everyone at CKS, and for people for staying with us today. Thank you.
Okay, great.